Before the fellowship, before the oaths and banners and the long road south, the darkness was already searching. It began as a whisper, soft as breath against candle flame, slipping through the halls of Minas Tirith and the root-choked paths of Greenwood alike. A name not spoken aloud, only felt, like a splinter beneath the skin, Gollum. Gandalf the Grey stood alone in the upper chamber of the White City, fingers stained with ink and ash, staring at a map worn thin by years of anxious study. The parchment trembled beneath his hand, though there was no wind. He felt it again, that pressure behind the eyes, that tightening in the chest that came when the world leaned too far toward shadow. Somewhere beyond the reach of light, something ancient had stirred. Somewhere, a creature remembered too much. "The ring has awakened him," Gandalf murmured, voice swallowed by the stone walls. "Or perhaps, it has awakened the world to him." He closed his eyes and saw a thin figure crawling through black water, eyes like pale moons in a skull stretched by hunger. He heard a voice arguing with itself, tenderness and venom braided together so tightly they could no longer be untangled. The creature was not merely lost. It was unmade, peeled apart by centuries of desire until only need remained. And need could be followed. That night, Gandalf summoned Aragorn, son of Arathorn, to a chamber lit by a single candle. Shadows stretched long and warped across the walls, bending Aragorn's tall frame into something older, harsher, more king than ranger. "The enemy is searching," Gandalf said without preamble. "Not blindly. Not patiently. He knows a secret lives, still breathing, still hiding. If Sauron finds him first, we will lose more than hope," Aragorn finished. His voice was steady, but his hand tightened on the hilt of his sword. He had hunted men and monsters across the wilds. Yet the thought of this hunt chilled him in a way steel never could. Gandalf nodded. "You must find Gollum before the darkness closes its fist." Aragorn did not ask why the task fell to him. He did not ask what mercy meant for a creature broken beyond reason. He only asked, "Where do I begin?" "Where the world forgets itself," Gandalf replied. "Where light hesitates." Gollum moved through the underroots of Mirkwood like a thought that should not exist. The forest pressed close, branches clawing at the air, leaves whispering secrets older than grief. Spiders watched from above, their many eyes gleaming with patient malice, but even they gave the creature space. They sensed something wrong with him, something emptied. His body was a map of survival etched in bone and scar. Every movement was a negotiation with pain. Every breath tasted of rot and memory. He spoke to himself constantly, not out of madness alone, but fear. Silence was dangerous. Silence allowed thoughts to wander where the ring used to live. "Not gone," he hissed, pressing his forehead into damp earth. "Never gone. Just waiting." Sometimes he dreamed of hands reaching for him, burning hands, crowned hands, hands made of shadow and fire. In those dreams, his name was not spoken. He was called thing. Tool. Door. He woke screaming, fingers clawing at his own throat as if to tear the dreams free. Above him, the forest shuddered. Something moved where nothing should. Aragorn followed rumors first. Then tracks. Then absence. Villages emptied without explanation. Campfires abandoned mid-meal. Hunters returned pale and shaking, speaking of a shape that watched from the dark, muttering in a voice like dry leaves dragged across stone. Aragorn listened, asked careful questions, and felt the slow tightening of a snare he could not see. Each night, he dreamed of eyes watching him from water so still it reflected the stars like wounds in the sky. He dreamed of a hand brushing his ankle as he crossed a stream, cold and desperate. He woke with his heart racing, sword already drawn, the wilderness holding its breath around him. He realized, with a quiet horror, that the hunt was not one-sided. Gollum felt him. Not by scent or sound, but by intent, a pressure in the air, a tightening in the bones. Someone was looking for him, not like the others had. This one carried sorrow like a blade and wore mercy as a burden. Hates us, Gollum whimpered. Wants us dead. No, whispered the other voice, thin and trembling. Wants to save us. The word burned. Save meant chains. Save meant questions. Save meant remembering. Far to the east, a lidless eye turned, not fully, not yet, but enough. A ripple passed through shadow and smoke, through crawling things and broken men. The search narrowed. The world leaned closer to a single, trembling point. Between hunter and hunted, between mercy and necessity, the line began to blur. And in the deep places of Middle-earth, something old and patient smiled, because no matter who found Gollum first, the truth he carried would bleed into the world. The hunt had begun. The wilderness remembered everything. Aragorn learned this as he followed the trail eastward, where Mirkwood thickened into a living labyrinth of shadow and rot. Leaves lay undisturbed for decades, yet a single careless step could echo for miles in the memory of the forest. Broken twigs whispered of passing limbs. Mud held the shape of feet long after flesh had moved on. Even the air seemed to retain the taste of fear. And fear, Aragorn realized, was everywhere. The tracks were faint. Barely impressions at all, pressed into damp soil like the ghost of a footstep. Too light for a man. Too uneven for any beast he knew. The toes dragged. The heels rarely touched. Whoever made them had learned to move not to travel, but to flee. Aragorn knelt, touching the earth with 2 fingers. The soil was cold. Wrongly cold. He's been here, Aragorn murmured, though no one walked beside him. Saying it aloud anchored him. Without words, the forest pressed too close, crowding his thoughts with shapes that moved when he did not look directly at them. The trail twisted unnaturally, looping back on itself, doubling, vanishing entirely only to reappear several paces away. It was not cleverness alone. It was instinct sharpened by centuries of being hunted. Aragorn felt a grim respect rise in him, followed immediately by dread. This was no ordinary prey. That night, Aragorn made camp in a hollow between gnarled roots. Firelight struggled against the dark, shadows stretching and snapping like living things. He ate little. Slept less. When he finally closed his eyes, the forest crept into his dreams. He saw water, black and endless. He stood at its edge, unable to see his reflection. Then something surfaced. Not rising, but unfolding. A face peeled itself out of the dark, eyes vast and pleading. Don't, the thing whispered. Don't look at us. Aragorn woke choking, hand clamped around his own throat. The fire had burned low. For a long moment, he could have sworn someone crouched just beyond. Its reach, rocking gently, whispering to itself. But there was nothing. Only the forest. Watching. Gollum knew he was closer now. The pressure in his skull had sharpened, becoming a constant ache. Not the burning pull of the ring, that was worse, always worse, but something steadier. He felt seen, even when alone in tunnels where light had never existed. Finds us, he hissed, clutching his head. Knows where we are. No, whispered the softer voice. Just looking. Just wants to talk. Gollum snarled at the thought. Talk led to names. Names led to memory. Memory led to pain sharp enough to split him open all over again. He fled deeper into the forest, then down, always down, into a fissure where roots twisted like strangling fingers and the air tasted of mold and old bones. This place remembered him. He had hidden here once, long ago, when the world still knew his first name. That memory crept up on him without permission. A river under starlight. Laughter. Hands not yet clawed. The memory cracked apart mid-thought, collapsing into screaming. Lies. Gollum shrieked, slamming his skull against stone until sparks danced in his vision. Tricksy memories. Not ours. But the past did not retreat. It waited. Aragorn found the place just before dawn. The forest grew suddenly silent, birds refusing to sing, insects stilled as if swallowed whole. The air thickened, heavy with something old and damp. Aragorn felt it immediately, the sense of trespass. Of crossing into a wound that had never healed. The fissure yawned before him, half hidden by thorn and root. A breath of cold air escaped it, carrying a stench that turned his stomach. Rot. Stagnant water. And beneath it all, a sharp tang like burned metal. He descended carefully, blade drawn. The walls narrowed, stone slick beneath his hands. Scratches marred the rock, long, frantic marks carved by fingers too thin to be human. Aragorn's torchlight flickered, shadows jerking wildly, as if trying to escape the flame. Then he heard it. Whispering. Not words at first. Just breath. Then fragments, broken syllables arguing with themselves, one voice pleading, the other snarling. Aragorn froze, heart hammering so loudly he feared it would betray him. Gollum, he said softly. Not a command. Not a threat. A name offered like an open hand. The whispering stopped. Silence fell so completely it rang. For one terrible heartbeat, Aragorn thought he was alone again. Then the darkness moved. Something skittered across stone with impossible speed, brushing past him, cold fingers grazing his wrist. Aragorn spun, torch flaring, too late. A shape vanished into a crack too small for any man. But not before Aragorn saw the eyes. They were not monstrous. Not truly. They were terrified. Aragorn stood trembling, realization sinking deep and heavy. This hunt was not simply pursuit. It was pursuit of a creature already half consumed. By the ring, by fear, by the watching darkness that crept ever closer. Far away, beyond forest and mountain, Sauron's will pressed outward like a spreading stain. His servants were moving now, drawn by whispers Aragorn could not hear. The hunt was tightening. And with every step Aragorn took closer to Gollum, the darkness followed, patient, inevitable, and hungry for what the creature knew. The night learned Aragorn's name. It whispered it through the trees as he moved, shaping the syllables out of rustling leaves and creaking branches. Each step forward felt less like progress and more like permission granted to something that had been waiting far longer than he had been alive. He sensed it then, with the certainty of a blade at his back. He was no longer the hunter alone. Aragorn did not sleep that night. He dared not. The fissure lay behind him now, sealed again by thorn and shadow, but its memory clung to him like damp cloth. He walked until his legs burned and his lungs scraped raw air from the forest, until the stars faded and a gray, sickly dawn seeped through the canopy. With daylight came revelation. The tracks returned, not fleeing now, but circling. Gollum had doubled back, not to escape, but to watch. Aragorn found impressions where the creature had crouched for hours, toes dug deep, fingers clawed into bark. In one place, the earth was darkened by something thicker than mud. Blood. Fresh. Aragorn's stomach tightened. He followed the trail carefully, slower now, aware that every sound he made announced him to unseen listeners. Ravens watched from above, their eyes too intelligent, their silence too deliberate. When one croaked at last, the sound echoed unnaturally, bouncing through the forest like laughter. The woods were no longer merely dark. They were alert. Gollum crouched in the hollow of a fallen tree, body folded into itself, ribs pressing sharp against gray skin. His fingers trembled as he pressed them into his ears, as though he could block out the sound of pursuit by force alone. "He's close," the harsh voice hissed. "Too close. Knows us. Smells us." "He didn't hurt us," whispered the other. "He said our name. Gently. The word gently cut deeper than cruelty ever could. Gollum rocked back and forth, scraping his spine against splintered wood. Images flashed behind his eyes, chains, fire, hands that grabbed and never let go. Then another image intruded, unwanted and unbearable, a tall man with tired eyes, standing in darkness, calling him not thing, not it, but Gollum. The creature gagged. No, he spat, biting his own arm until blood filled his mouth. Tricksy man thing. Wants secrets. Wants precious. The eye had shown him the truth. Not in words, but pressure. Dreams. Pain. It had promised him release from memory if he would only be found. Let the darkness take the burden of knowing. Let the world end quietly. But the man hunted him with something far worse than cruelty. Choice. Aragorn reached the edge of the forest by noon. Beyond the trees, the land dipped into a marsh where mist clung low and heavy, swallowing sound. Pools of black water reflected the sky imperfectly, distorting light into bruised shapes. The smell of decay thickened, sweet and suffocating. He hesitated. Every instinct screamed danger. This place was wrong. Not cursed in the way of ancient ruins, but abandoned, as if even evil had passed through and found nothing worth keeping. Then he saw movement. A ripple disturbed the surface of a pool. Something thin and pale slid beneath the water, too quick to track. Aragorn moved forward, boots sinking into sucking mud. His breath fogged in the cold air. Gollum, he called again, louder now. I won't harm you. The mist answered. It thickened, crawling up his legs, wrapping his chest. Shapes formed within it, suggestions of bodies, of faces stretched long by drowning. Aragorn's heart thundered. He raised his sword, though steel felt suddenly small. A voice rose from the fog. Not Gollum's. It was deeper. Layered. A sound that scraped the inside of his skull. Hunter. Aragorn staggered as pressure slammed into his thoughts, visions forced upon him. A tower burning. A lidless eye. A creature screaming as hands peeled secrets from its mind. He dropped to one knee, teeth clenched, fighting for breath. No, he growled. You will not have him. Laughter rippled through the mist. You are already too late. The fog thinned suddenly, retreating as quickly as it had come. Aragorn gasped, sweat soaking his clothes despite the cold. The presence withdrew, but not fully. It lingered, watching. Testing. Aragorn understood then with chilling clarity, Sauron did not need to find Gollum himself. He only needed to be close enough to feel him. Gollum burst from the marsh screaming. He clawed his way onto solid ground, lungs burning, body convulsing. His mind reeled, fragments of another will still embedded like hooks. The eye had touched him more directly than ever before. It had seen through him. No more hiding, the harsh voice sobbed. No more running. But the man, whispered the other. The man is still looking. Gollum froze. He smelled him then, smoke, steel, grief. The scent cut through the marsh wrought like a blade. Gollum's eyes widened, pupils shrinking as panic tightened his chest. The hunter was close. Closer than ever. And behind the hunter, like a shadow stitched to the world itself, the darkness followed, patient, vast, and certain that sooner or later, every trail led back to it. Aragorn rose from the marsh edge, eyes scanning the thinning mist. He felt it now too. Two paths converging. One creature. One secret. And a narrowing space where mercy and doom would collide. Somewhere ahead, something screamed, not in pain, but terror. The hunt had changed. It was no longer about finding Gollum. It was about reaching him before he broke completely. And Aragorn feared, deeply, irrevocably, that the world might already be too late. Night fell like a verdict. It came swiftly, smothering the last pale light with a darkness so thick it seemed poured from the sky. Aragorn stood at the edge of the marsh long after the scream faded, listening to the slow, sick breathing of the land. Somewhere ahead, Gollum was running again, but not blindly now. Fear had sharpened into something more dangerous. Desperation. Aragorn moved cautiously, every step measured. The ground here remembered suffering. Each footfall released the scent of old decay and something fouler beneath, regret, perhaps, soaked so deeply into the soil that it had become part of it. The mist crept back in low coils, clinging to his legs like grasping fingers. He felt watched. Not as before, not by a distant will pressing against his mind, but by something nearer. Closer. Something that breathed. A soft sound reached him then, a wet, choking sob. Aragorn froze. The sound came again, unmistakable now. Not an animal. Not the forest. Someone was crying. He followed the sound into a cluster of twisted reeds where the ground rose just enough to stay dry. There, hunched against a stone half sunk into the earth, was Gollum. The creature was smaller than Aragorn had imagined. Pitifully so. His body shook with each breath, ribs visible beneath stretched skin. Long fingers dug into the mud as if he feared being pulled away if he let go. His face was hidden, but Aragorn could hear the muttering. Two voices overlapping, tearing at one another. "They're coming," Gollum whimpered. "Eyes everywhere. Can't hide. Can't hide." "Quiet," snarled the other voice. "He'll hear us." Aragorn stepped forward, deliberately snapping a twig beneath his boot. Gollum screamed. He spun with inhuman speed, scrambling backward, eyes wide and shining with terror. His mouth opened impossibly wide, teeth bared not in threat, but panic. "Stay back," he shrieked. "Stay back or we bites." Aragorn raised his hands slowly, sword lowered but not sheathed. His heart pounded, not with the thrill of pursuit, but something heavier. "I won't hurt you," he said again, softly. "I swear it." Gollum's laughter burst out suddenly, high, broken, wrong. "Swears," he mocked, rocking back and forth. "They all swear. Then comes the fire. The chains. The screaming." Aragorn's chest tightened. He saw it now, clearly, the scars, the way Gollum flinched at every movement, the way his eyes darted constantly to the shadows as if expecting them to reach out and drag him away. This was not a monster in the way tales described. This was a ruin. Before Aragorn could speak again, the night shifted. A pressure rolled through the marsh, low and suffocating, like the world itself had drawn a breath. The mist thickened violently, swallowing sound. Gollum's eyes snapped toward the east, his face contorting in pure horror. "He's here," Gollum whimpered. "He's looking." Aragorn felt it too. The eye did not appear. It did not need to. Its presence bent the dark, twisted it inward. Aragorn's vision blurred as whispers slid into his thoughts, promises, threats, certainties. "Give him." Aragorn staggered, dropping to one knee. He clenched his teeth, forcing the voice out, anchoring himself to the weight of his body, the cold earth beneath his hands. "No," he growled. "You will not take him." Gollum screamed again, clawing at his head. "Make it stop. Make it stop." Without thinking, Aragorn moved. He closed the distance between them in 3 strides and wrapped his arms around the thrashing creature, pinning him gently but firmly. Gollum fought like a cornered animal, biting, scratching, sobbing, but Aragorn held on, murmuring words he barely remembered learning. "Easy," he whispered. "You're not alone." The pressure broke. The mist recoiled as if burned. The whispers vanished mid-thought. Silence rushed back in, heavy and stunned. Gollum collapsed against Aragorn's chest, shaking violently. For a long moment, neither moved. Then Gollum whispered, so quietly it was almost lost, "Why didn't you let him take us?" The question struck harder than any blade. Aragorn swallowed. "Because it would have destroyed you." Gollum laughed weakly. "Already destroyed." Aragorn loosened his grip but did not let go entirely. He looked down at the creature, this being who had once been something else, something better, and felt the crushing weight of Gandalf's unspoken warning. Mercy would cost him. Keeping Gollum alive meant carrying him, feeding him, protecting him from the darkness, and from himself. Every step forward would drag the eye closer. Every delay would tighten the noose around the world. Yet when Aragorn imagined handing Gollum over to Shadow, something inside him recoiled violently. "I won't abandon you," Aragorn said at last. Gollum's eyes searched his face, desperate, disbelieving. "Lies?" "No," Aragorn replied. "Truth." For the first time, one of Gollum's voices fell completely silent. The other whispered, trembling, "Then we walks with you." Aragorn nodded. Behind them, far beyond marsh and forest, something ancient and furious noticed the sudden stillness where a creature had almost been claimed. The eye narrowed. The hunt was no longer just about pursuit. It had become a battle of wills. And Aragorn, bearing the fragile weight of mercy, began to understand the terrible truth. Saving Gollum might doom them all. But abandoning him would damn Aragorn forever. They did not travel as companions. They traveled as survivors bound by fear. Gollum walked several paces ahead, crouched low, limbs bent at unnatural angles as if his body had forgotten the correct shape of a living thing. He moved silently, but not calmly. His head jerked constantly, eyes scanning the dark, nostrils flaring as though the night itself might lunge at him. Aragorn followed with measured steps, every sense sharpened, every instinct screaming that something was wrong. Not ahead, but beside them. The forest beyond the marsh grew thinner, older. Trees stood crooked and scarred, bark split open like old wounds that never healed. The moon hung low and sickly, its light dimmed as if reluctant to witness what moved beneath it. Aragorn felt the weight of unseen attention press against his spine. He was being judged. Gollum stopped suddenly. "Don't," he hissed. "Don't go that way." Aragorn paused. "Why?" Gollum's lips peeled back from his teeth. "It remembers." Before Aragorn could ask what it meant, the air changed. The forest fell into a deep, unnatural silence, not the quiet of sleep, but of something holding its breath. Aragorn felt the hairs on his arms rise. His hand tightened on his sword. Then the whispers began. Not inside his head this time, but all around them. Voices slid from tree to tree, low and murmuring, layered so densely they became almost impossible to separate. Some spoke in languages Aragorn had never learned. Others used his own tongue, his own memories. Isildur's heir. You will fail as he did. You cannot save what is already claimed. Aragorn staggered as the words struck deep, cutting with terrifying precision. He tasted blood where his teeth cut his lip. Gollum collapsed to his knees, shrieking. "Stop it! Stop it! We didn't tell. We didn't." The ground beneath them pulsed. Not shook, pulsed, as if something massive shifted beneath the earth. Roots writhed, tearing free, curling like fingers. Shadows stretched and twisted, forming shapes that were almost human but wrong in their proportions, too tall, too thin, faces smoothed blank like erased memories. Aragorn understood with a sinking horror. These were not servants of Sauron. They were echoes. Places where despair had lingered too long. Where fear had been fed until it learned to speak. The forest was remembering pain, and Gollum was its key. "Stay behind me," Aragorn commanded. Gollum clutched at his cloak, nails digging into wool. It's our fault, he sobbed. Everywhere we go, it wakes up. One of the shadow forms stepped forward. Its movement was jerky, uncertain, like a puppet discovering motion for the first time. Where its face should have been, Aragorn saw flickering images, men screaming, towers burning, hands reaching for something just out of reach. The thing opened its mouth. The sound that came out was not a roar, but a plea. Aragorn screamed back, not in fear, but defiance, and charged. Steel passed through Shadow with little resistance, but the impact sent a shock through his arm, numbing it to the bone. The shape recoiled, unraveling into black smoke that sank into the soil. Another replaced it instantly. They were not attacking to kill. They were trying to break him. Gollum shrieked again, convulsing as if strings were being pulled inside his skull. He's calling, he cried. He knows where we are now. Aragorn felt it then. A distant tightening, like a lid closing over the world. The eye was not present, but its attention was. It pressed against reality, narrowing options, erasing futures. Aragorn grabbed Gollum and ran. Branches tore at them. Roots rose to trip their feet. The whispers grew louder, angrier, more personal. You cannot carry this burden. You will choose wrong. You always do. Aragorn burst into a clearing and skidded to a halt. At its center stood an ancient stone, cracked cleanly in two, its surface carved with runes so old they had been worn nearly smooth. The air here was heavy, but still. The whispers recoiled at its edge, hissing like steam on hot iron. Gollum collapsed beside it, gasping. This place, he whispered. It hurts him. Aragorn didn't ask who him was. He knelt, gripping Gollum's shoulders. Listen to me. You cannot let him into your mind. Gollum laughed weakly, tears streaking down his face. Too late. He's always there. Even when he's not. The honesty of it cut deeper than fear. Aragorn looked at the trembling creature and saw, with crushing clarity, what Gandalf had truly meant. Gollum was not simply being hunted. He was being used, as a doorway. As long as he lived, the eye would never stop looking through him. The shadows lingered at the edge of the clearing, writhing, frustrated. The forest groaned, as if disappointed. Far away, something ancient and furious tightened its grip on the world. Aragorn rose slowly, placing himself between Gollum and the dark. He understood now. Protecting Gollum did not mean fighting enemies with swords. It meant standing between a broken soul and a godlike will that wanted to hollow the world through him. And the most terrifying truth of all settled into Aragorn's bones like ice. If Gollum fell, if he gave in, even for a moment, the darkness would not need to hunt anymore. It would already be walking freely beside them. They did not leave the clearing until dawn, and even then, the darkness followed. It clung to the edges of the world, lurking just beyond sight, patient and intelligent. Aragorn felt it like a weight stitched into his shadow, wherever he stepped, it stepped too. The ancient stone behind them faded into the trees, its silent protection lost, and the whispers returned in fragments, careful now. Calculated. Gollum walked closer to Aragorn than before. Too close. His fingers brushed Aragorn's cloak constantly, not by accident but necessity, as if distance itself had become dangerous. His muttering grew quieter, more inward, the two voices no longer arguing openly. That frightened Aragorn more than the screaming ever had. Silence meant something had learned. They reached a narrow ravine by midday, its walls steep and jagged, the path reduced to a thin strip of gravel above a dark drop. Wind howled through it like a living thing, carrying voices that did not belong to the air. Gollum stopped. No, he whispered. Not here. Aragorn studied the ravine. It's the fastest way through. Gollum's face twisted, eyes glazing as if he were looking inward instead of ahead. This place listens, he said. It goes inside. Before Aragorn could respond, the wind changed. It slowed. Then it spoke. Not aloud, not in sound, but beneath the skin, vibrating through bone and thought alike. Aragorn staggered as the presence surged, stronger than before, more intimate. This was not the distant pressure of the eye. This was something closer. You are tired, son of kings. Aragorn's vision blurred. He tasted iron. You cannot watch him forever. The voice slithered through his thoughts, smooth and intimate, like a hand slipping beneath armor. He is already mine. Gollum collapsed, screaming. He clawed at his own chest, fingers digging deep enough to draw blood. Get out, he shrieked. Get out of us. Aragorn dropped to his knees beside him, gripping his shoulders. Gollum. Look at me. But Gollum's eyes had rolled back, pupils swallowed by white. His body arched violently, spine bowing as if something inside him strained to break free. Then his mouth opened. And another voice spoke through it. Not fractured. Not afraid. Whole. Strider, it said. Aragorn recoiled. The sound was wrong, too calm, too certain. It carried no breath, no strain of flesh. It came from somewhere far deeper than lungs. You cannot keep him, the voice continued. He is an open wound. Through him, I see. Aragorn felt his strength falter. Memories surfaced unbidden, Isildur's failure, the broken line of kings, the crown he did not yet dare to claim. The voice pressed into those doubts, widening them. Let him go, it urged softly. You will be free. For one terrible heartbeat, Aragorn understood the temptation. Then he saw Gollum's face beneath the possession, twisted, terrified, drowning. And Aragorn roared. He seized Gollum, pulling him close, pressing his forehead against the creature's. You will not take him, Aragorn snarled. Not through me. The voice laughed, once. The sound cracked the air. Gollum convulsed violently, then went limp. Silence fell. Aragorn held the creature long after the danger seemed to pass, heart hammering, body shaking. Slowly, Gollum's eyes fluttered open. They focused, barely. It spoke, Gollum whispered. Used our mouth. Aragorn nodded grimly. I know. Gollum's lips trembled. It's learning. That night, they made camp under bare rock, no fire, no sound. Aragorn did not sleep. He sat with his back to the stone, sword across his knees, watching Gollum's shallow breathing. Sometime before dawn, Gollum stirred. They're coming, he whispered. Aragorn stiffened. What? The other hunters, Gollum said. Not shadows. Not whispers. He sniffed the air, pupils shrinking. Metal. Leather. Hate. Orcs. Aragorn cursed under his breath. He gathered Gollum quickly, pulling him deeper into the ravine's shadows as torches appeared above, flickering points of orange. Light cutting through the gloom. Voices followed, harsh and guttural, carrying the stench of cruelty. They know, Gollum whimpered. He told them. Aragorn felt the truth of it settle like a blade in his gut. The eye no longer needed to peer through Gollum constantly. It had learned enough. Orcs descended into the ravine, boots scraping stone, blades drawn. Their eyes gleamed with purpose, not searching blindly, but guided. Aragorn drew his sword. He did not know if he could protect Gollum from the darkness within him. But he would not let the darkness outside claim him easily. Steel met flesh in a blur of motion. Aragorn struck fast and silent, cutting down the first orc before it could cry out. The second lunged, snarling, and Aragorn split its skull with a single blow. But more came. Too many. Gollum shrank against the rock, covering his ears as the screams echoed. It's our fault, he sobbed. Always our fault. Aragorn fought like a man possessed, not by shadow, but purpose. Each strike was fueled by defiance, by the refusal to let this broken creature become the doorway through which the world ended. When the last orc fell, the ravine stank of blood and smoke. Aragorn stood panting, body aching, sword slick with black ichor. He turned to Gollum. The creature stared at him with something new in his eyes. Not trust. Not hope. Fear, but mixed with awe. You fight him, Gollum whispered. Aragorn wiped his blade clean. I fight for you. Gollum looked away, shaking. Then he will never stop. Aragorn knew. The darkness had spoken through Gollum's mouth. It had learned Aragorn's name. And next time, it would not ask. The hunt was ending. The reckoning was beginning. Dawn rose without warmth. A thin, colorless light seeped into the ravine, revealing the aftermath of the night's violence. Orc bodies lay twisted where they had fallen, their faces frozen in expressions of rage and confusion, as if even in death they could not understand why the prey had resisted so fiercely. Black blood pooled between stones, steaming faintly, and the smell of it clung to the air like a curse. Aragorn stood among them, exhausted to the marrow. His arms trembled, not from battle alone, but from what it had cost him to stand firm against something far greater than steel and flesh. He felt older than he had the night before. Older than his years should allow. Gollum would not look at the bodies. He sat curled against the rock wall, knees pulled tight to his chest, fingers pressed into his ears as if the scream still echoed there. His lips moved soundlessly, prayer or apology or madness, Aragorn could not tell which. They died because of us, Gollum whispered at last. Because he wanted us. Aragorn sheathed his sword slowly. They died because they chose darkness. Gollum laughed, sharp and broken. Everyone chooses it in the end. Aragorn turned to him then, truly looked at him, not as a mission, not as a burden, but as a being standing at the center of a storm that threatened to swallow the world. No, Aragorn said. Not everyone. The word surprised them both. They left the ravine quietly, moving west now, away from the narrowing grip of Mordor's will. Aragorn chose harder paths, rocky climbs, exposed ridges, places where the eye's attention thinned but the danger of the land itself grew sharper. Every step was a gamble. Every mile risked discovery. Gollum weakened quickly. Without the ring, without the deep caves and familiar dark, his body protested every movement. His breath rattled. His hands shook. Sometimes he collapsed without warning, eyes unfocused, whispering to someone who was not there. During one such fall, Aragorn caught him before. His head struck stone. Gollum stared up at him, eyes glassy. Why? He croaked. Why not give us up? You could be free. Aragorn did not answer immediately. He thought of Gandalf's warning. Of the fragile thread on which the fate of the world hung. Of the countless lives that might be spared, or destroyed, by the choice he made now. Then he thought of the creature in his arms. Because someone must choose mercy first, Aragorn said quietly. Even if it costs everything. Gollum trembled violently, a sound halfway between a sob and a laugh tearing from his throat. For a fleeting moment, something else surfaced in his eyes, a shadow of who he had been before centuries of hunger and obsession had hollowed him out. Mercy hurts, Gollum whispered. Yes, Aragorn replied. It does. That night, as they sheltered beneath an overhang of stone, the darkness came again, but differently. No whispers. No voices. Only watching. Aragorn felt it like a blade held just out of sight, poised but not yet falling. The eye did not push. It did not probe. It simply observed, learning patience. Gollum shuddered in his sleep, clutching his chest. He's angry, he murmured. Not screaming anymore. Aragorn understood the danger in that silence. Far away, in towers of fire and ash, Sauron adjusted his designs. He no longer needed Gollum immediately. The creature was marked now. Bound to a path that would, in time, lead the ring back into his reach. All he needed was time. Aragorn rose before dawn, staring east as if he could see through leagues of stone and shadow. He felt the weight of what was coming, felt it settle into his bones like an oath he had not yet sworn but already carried. This hunt had not ended with capture or victory. It had ended with a decision. To protect Gollum, to keep him alive, hidden, and watched. Meant accepting that the future would bend around this choice. That wars would rise. That lives would be lost. That the smallest, most broken creature could still decide the fate of kings. When Gollum woke, Aragorn spoke the truth plainly. "I will take you to where you can be guarded," he said. "Where the darkness cannot reach you easily." Gollum stared at him in horror. "Cage," he whispered. "Prison." "Protection," Aragorn corrected gently. "For you. And for the world." Gollum's voices warred openly now, one screaming, one weeping. At last, he sagged, defeated not by chains, but exhaustion. "We don't want to be alone anymore," he said softly. Aragorn nodded. "You won't be." As they walked on, the world seemed to exhale, just slightly. Not in relief, but in anticipation. Threads unseen began to tighten and align. Paths that would one day converge, at Rivendell, at a council not yet imagined, at a fellowship not yet formed, shifted into place. Before songs were sung. Before the ring was revealed. Before hope gathered its final strength. A ranger chose mercy over fear. A broken creature was spared. And the darkness learned something it had not expected. That even without crowns or armies, even before legends were written, the fate of Middle-earth could turn on a single, terrible act of compassion. The hunt for Gollum was over. The war for the world had already begun.